I was just talking to my mentor, and she said, you know, she said some of the things that you're holding inside might help some people. You know, your testimony. Lord have mercy. I don't think they make a long enough area. I would have to put it in. I'd have to break it all down. But I remembered one time, and this lady, she was an atheist, and she was putting God down. And at the time, it's been a long time ago, I was dating this gentleman that he was the only son of a very rich individual, and I was supposed to be going to church that Sunday morning, and he picked me up. And instead of taking me to church, he took me over to a friend of his house. A couple, they were married, I think. I'm not sure. And she was a big wheel at one of the companies here, and she started laughing when she found out that I was dressed up to go to church. And I unpolitely went off on her. And I didn't understand, because it was the first one that I'd ever met that didn't believe in God. And I mean, when I say I went off on her, I mean I was fighting mad, and I know that's the wrong way to be, but that's what it was. And I said, "What do you mean you don't believe in God?" And she started laughing again. She said, "I don't." I said, "Well, what do you believe in?" She said, "Oh, I believe there's a higher being." I said, "What kind of higher being? Like an alien?" And then she started laughing again. She said, "I just believe there's a higher being." I said, "You mean inside yourself?" "What are you talking about?" And she never could explain it. And I said, "I tell you what, I'm going to have to leave out of your house." I'm sorry. And the gentleman I was with got very upset, and he wasn't going nowhere, so I left out there walking, pulled my heels off, and started walking home. And a few minutes later, he come down there and he said, "I'll take you home." I said, "How dare you take me to that place?" He said, "I didn't know. I did not know." And I said, "Do you go to church at all?" And he said, "No." I said, "Just stop the car." He said, "Why?" I said, "I need to run in the store for a minute." And he let me out. I said, "Bye." Because to me, as young as I was, I thought they were the devil. Hey, I'm not going to lie about it. That's what I thought. Anybody that didn't believe in God, to me, was Satan, and that's just the way I looked at it. There's so many times, I never spoke to that lady again, and I shouldn't have done it that well. I don't know how I should have done it. It's too late now. It's too many years ago. And it was a long time ago. I probably should have been nicer, but nah, that's not who I am. That's just not who I am. You don't believe in God, then I don't belong in your world, and you don't belong in mine, so let me out of your car and I'll walk home. Anyway, when it comes to people's lives getting unsaved, I've had people tell me they didn't believe me. It'll happen to you one day. It'll happen to you one day when you least expect it. I've had my life saved more times than you'll ever know. But you got to believe. You got to believe. You got to believe in God. You can't, just say, I can go out and jump in front of this car and something's going to save me. If you don't have a personal relationship with God, that's not going to happen. You got to know God. You got to know God. And anybody's got any common sense, they is not going to just step out in front of a car. Now, I told my landlord 2 weeks in advance that we were going to be in a wreck. I felt it. And I was holding on and everything else because I knew any day we were, and we did. We had a wreck. And it totaled the car. I wasn't really shocked because I already knew it, you know. I didn't get hurt. My dog didn't get hurt. But he did, a little bit. He had to go to the hospital. He was driving. But, you know, there's people, when you believe in God, you got to open your mind up. When you believe in God, you can't just say, I believe in God. You got to really, really believe in Him. And there's been so many times, like the time that I was drowning and I was pushed up out the water, people was calling me stupid and crazy and everything else on that one. I'm telling you the truth. I wish I could say it is written, but it's not written. But I wish somebody would believe me on this. There was nobody down there with me except fishes, and there was no fish that was going to take a hand and put it in a small part of my back and push me out of that water. There was nobody in that water with me. They were all laid up on the land in the sun. And when I come up out of that water, I must have been flying because I seen people start standing up and looking, you know. I must have been flying out of that water because it felt like I was. And I turned around and looked to see if anybody coming out behind me. Like I said, there was nobody in that water. Now, you'd be surprised at things that happens when you honestly have a personal relationship with God. And I don't mean just personal. I mean reading His Word every single day. Every single day. My mother and I, lightning come through the house when I was a child and bounced off the kitchen sink and hit the back of the refrigerator. And she and I and I was knee-high a grasshopper, picked that refrigerator up and took it out the back door by herself and put it in the yard and put the fire out inside and on the refrigerator. We went and lit it later and couldn't budge it. Now, you explain it. We had help, okay. We had help. And amazingly enough, that was one of the times when my father was sticking around for a minute. Him and some of his friends carried the refrigerator back in, plugged it back up, and it worked just fine. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on about some things that most people wouldn't believe. But I won't. Not right now, not this go around. The Lord has saved me from many things. Many, many things. And I'm glad that He gave us Gentiles a chance to be His children. Because I'd be so lost without Him. Much love, honor, respect to each and every one of you.